On the morning of her wedding, Eleanor Vale discovered that the man waiting for her at the altar had never intended to marry her. The discovery came in the form of a letter. It was lying on the dressing table beside her wedding gloves, its ivory paper folded with almost careless precision. The seal had already been broken. Eleanor stared at it for several seconds before touching it. Outside the tall windows, November rain fell across the gardens of Vale House, turning the lawns into dark sheets of silver. The sky was the color of ash. Bare branches trembled against the glass. Behind her, 3 maids moved quietly through the room. One adjusted the train of her wedding gown. Another fastened the final pearl into her hair. The third stood near the fireplace, holding a velvet box and pretending not to listen. Eleanor picked up the letter. She knew the handwriting. Lady Victoria Harcourt, the woman whose name had followed the Duke of Blackthorne for nearly 2 years. The woman everyone in London had believed would become his Duchess. Eleanor read the first line, then the second. By the third, her fingers had begun to tremble. Adrian, you told me this marriage would never happen. Eleanor stopped reading. For a moment, she could hear nothing except the faint hiss of rain against the window. Then she folded the letter, not carefully, not gently. She placed it back on the table. Her maid looked at her through the mirror. Your Grace? Eleanor met her reflection. She was not yet a duchess, not until the vows, not until the ring, not until the man she was about to marry placed his name beside hers and made her part of a family that did not want her. Nothing, Eleanor said. Her voice was remarkably steady. Continue. The maid lowered her eyes. The wedding dress was beautiful, that almost made it crueler. Ivory silk fell from Eleanor's shoulders in soft layers, embroidered with tiny flowers along the sleeves. Her mother's pearl necklace rested against her throat. The fabric was heavy enough to remind her with every movement that she had been dressed for a role she had never chosen. She looked like a bride, but she did not feel like one. She felt like a prisoner who had been taught to smile. 6 weeks earlier, Eleanor had not known the Duke of Blackthorne personally. She had only known his reputation. Lord Adrian Ashcombe, 35 years old, the richest unmarried aristocrat in the county, widowed estates under his authority, hundreds of acres surrounding Blackthorne Hall, political influence in London, and a family name old enough to appear in history books. He was also known for being difficult, cold, unapproachable, and, according to every woman who had attended a London ball that season, hopelessly devoted to Lady Victoria Harcourt. Eleanor had never expected to meet him, certainly not to marry him, but then her father had summoned her to his study. It had been raining that afternoon, too. Her father stood beside the fireplace with a letter in his hand. He did not offer her a chair. Eleanor. She knew immediately something was wrong. What happened? He looked toward the window. The bank has refused another extension. She frowned. Extension for what? He said nothing. Her stomach tightened. The estate. A long silence. Then her father nodded. Eleanor slowly sat down. How much? He told her. She stared at him. The number seemed impossible. You never told me. I didn't want you concerned. You concealed a debt large enough to lose the house. Her father's expression hardened. I was trying to protect you. From the truth? He looked away. Eleanor stood. What happens now? Her father did not answer. That silence told her everything. Then came the knock at the door. A servant entered carrying a sealed letter. The crest belonged to the Ashcombe family. Eleanor saw it. Her father watched her face. She understood before he spoke. No. Eleanor, no. You haven't heard the proposal. I don't need to. You are 23, and you cannot spend your life believing that sentiment alone will save you. She stared at him. Who? Her father swallowed. The Duke of Blackthorne. For a moment, Eleanor thought she had misheard him. Then she laughed. It was a small, disbelieving sound. The Duke? Yes. He doesn't know me. He has agreed to the marriage. Why? Her father looked down. Because I have agreed to settle his family's outstanding financial obligations. Eleanor's smile disappeared. You mean our debts? Yes. And he pays them if I marry him. Her father said nothing. Eleanor walked toward the window. Rain had begun to collect along the glass. So that is what I am worth. You are my daughter. Apparently I am also the last valuable thing you have left." Her father's face tightened. "Do not make this harder than it already is." She turned. "I am not the one selling a marriage." The words hung between them. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then her father said quietly, "You may refuse." Eleanor stared at him. "May I?" "Yes. And what happens if I do?" He looked toward the fireplace. "We lose the estate, and then, I don't know." That was the truth. For the first time, Eleanor understood that her father's pride had already brought them to the edge of ruin. If she refused, there would be no elegant country house, no servants, no protection, no future for her younger sister. The Vale name would disappear beneath its debts. Eleanor closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the decision had already been made. "When is the wedding?" Her father looked at her. 6 weeks. She nodded. "Then I suppose I should meet my future husband." She met Adrian Ashcombe 3 days later. Blackthorne Hall stood beneath a gray winter sky. The estate was enormous. Dark stone walls, tall narrow windows, iron gates, ancient trees twisting across the grounds like black veins. Nothing about it felt welcoming. Eleanor's carriage passed through the gates just before sunset. Inside, servants waited in perfect silence. A butler led her through corridors decorated with portraits of dead Ashcombes, men in military uniforms, women wearing diamonds, children with solemn faces. Everyone looked as though they had been trained never to smile. Then the library doors opened. Adrian was standing beside the fireplace. Eleanor had expected someone imposing. She had not expected him to be beautiful. His black hair was slightly disordered, as though he had run his hand through it moments earlier. His face was sharply defined, his expression controlled, but his eyes were what she remembered. Gray. Not soft gray. The color of winter clouds. He looked at her without smiling. "Miss Vale, Your Grace." He gestured toward the chair. She sat. He did not. That was the first indication of how their marriage would be. She would wait. He would decide. He studied her for a moment. "I assume your father explained the circumstances." "He explained enough, and you understand that this arrangement is practical." "Yes, nothing more." Eleanor's eyes lifted. "I understand." He paused. "I don't want to mislead you. You aren't. I had previously intended to marry Lady Victoria Harcourt." Eleanor felt the words like a small cut. Still, she kept her expression calm. "I know." She declined. "I know that too." Something in his expression shifted. "You have been well informed. I had no choice." Adrian looked away. The firelight moved across his face. "I will provide you with every comfort. That is generous. You will have your own rooms, your own staff, freedom to manage the household as you wish." "And affection?" He looked at her. For the first time, silence stretched between them. Then he answered, "I cannot promise that." Eleanor nodded. "Then don't." He seemed surprised. She stood. "I would rather know the truth before the wedding than discover it afterward." Adrian watched her. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "A frightened girl." Eleanor gave him a faint smile. "I am frightened." His expression changed. "But I have learned that fear is not always a reason to surrender." She walked toward the door. Adrian's voice stopped her. "Miss Vale." She turned. "I will not humiliate you." Eleanor looked at him. "That is a very low promise, Your Grace." Then she left. Adrian remained alone. He watched the door close. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he found himself thinking about her words. 6 weeks later, they stood before the altar. The church was filled with aristocrats. Eleanor could feel hundreds of eyes upon her as she walked down the aisle. She did not look at Adrian until she reached him. When she finally did, she saw no excitement in his face, no tenderness, not even nervousness, only resignation. He took her hand. His fingers were cold. The priest began the ceremony. Eleanor heard the vows. She heard her own voice answering. She felt the ring slide onto her finger. Then Adrian leaned toward her. His kiss was brief, a formal gesture, nothing more. Applause filled the church. Eleanor smiled because everyone was watching. and somewhere beyond the chapel doors, rain began falling again. That evening, the new Duchess of Blackthorne stood alone in her bedroom. Her wedding gown lay across the floor. Her veil had been removed. The pearl necklace was still around her throat. A servant knocked. "Your Grace." "Yes." "The Duke requests your presence at dinner." Eleanor looked toward the mirror. For one brief moment, she thought about the letter from Victoria. Then she touched the wedding ring. "Tell His Grace I will come." Downstairs, Adrian waited beside the dining table. 2 places had been prepared. 2 candles burned between them. Eleanor entered. He looked up. Their eyes met. Neither smiled. Then the doors closed behind her. And somewhere in London, the woman Adrian had once intended to marry was writing him another letter. This time, she was not asking him to return. She was telling him she had decided to come to Blackthorne Hall herself, and she was bringing with her a secret that would change Eleanor's marriage forever. The first thing Eleanor noticed when she entered the dining room was that Adrian had not looked up. He was seated at the far end of the long mahogany table, one hand resting beside his untouched wineglass, the other holding a letter. The candlelight moved across his face. He looked tired, not sorrowful, not troubled, simply tired, as though marriage had been another obligation added to a life already crowded with them. Eleanor stopped at the doorway. For a moment, she wondered whether she should turn around. Instead, she walked toward the empty chair. "Your Grace." Adrian finally looked at her. "Eleanor." It was the first time he had used her Christian name. She noticed. She wished she hadn't. He gestured toward the chair. "Please." She sat. A servant approached and poured wine. Eleanor placed her fingers around the stem of the glass but did not drink. Neither did Adrian. The silence stretched between them. It was not an uncomfortable silence that would have required intimacy. This was something colder, 2 strangers sitting across from one another because a priest had declared them husband and wife that afternoon. At last, Adrian folded the letter. "I received another message from London." Eleanor looked at him. "From Lady Victoria?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes." She lowered her gaze. "What does she want?" "I don't know." That answer surprised her. "You haven't read it?" "I have." "And?" Adrian looked toward the window. "She says she is coming here." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the wineglass. "When?" "Tomorrow." There was a pause. "Why?" "I don't know." Eleanor gave a faint smile. "Perhaps you should ask her." Adrian looked back at her. "You don't sound surprised." "I have known about her for months." "You have known about rumors." "I have known that you intended to marry her." His expression hardened. "That was before you." Eleanor's eyes met his. "Was it?" Adrian said nothing. The servant returned with the first course. Silverware touched porcelain. The soft sound seemed strangely loud. Eleanor began to eat. Adrian did not. After several minutes he said, "You may wish to avoid the drawing room tomorrow." She stopped. "Why?" "Victoria may attempt to make the situation unpleasant." Eleanor slowly placed her fork down. "For me?" "For everyone." There was something almost protective in his voice. It was so subtle that she nearly imagined it. "Should I be afraid of her?" "No." "Then why should I hide?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "You are my wife." Eleanor looked at him. "And that means?" "It means I don't want you subjected to unnecessary humiliation." She studied him. "That is the second promise you've made me." His eyes remained fixed on hers. "What was the first?" "You said you would never humiliate me." "And I meant it." "Then perhaps I will stay." Adrian seemed about to respond. Instead, he returned his attention to his plate. The conversation ended. Later that night, Eleanor stood before the bedroom mirror removing her earrings. Her reflection looked unfamiliar. She was wearing a simple white nightgown. Her hair had fallen loose around her shoulders. There was a faint red mark on her finger where the wedding ring had pressed against her skin. She touched it. The door opened. Adrian entered. Eleanor turned. For one brief second, neither spoke. He stopped several feet away. "I will sleep in the west wing." She nodded. "I understand. You should not feel obligated to share my room." "I don't." He looked at her. Perhaps he had expected disappointment. Instead, he saw relief. That seemed to bother him. "I will have everything you require brought here." "Thank you." He turned toward the door. Adrian. He stopped. Eleanor hesitated. Did you love her? The question remained suspended between them. He did not ask who she meant. Once. The answer was quiet. Eleanor nodded. I thought so. He looked at her. Why did you ask? Because I would rather understand the man I married. And what have you learned? She smiled sadly. That you married the wrong woman. His expression changed. You believe that? I believe you believe it. Adrian stared at her. Then he left. The door closed. Eleanor stood alone. She expected tears. They never came. Instead, something much quieter settled inside her. Acceptance. She had entered this marriage knowing Adrian did not love her, but she had not understood how little he wanted her. There was a difference. And that difference would matter. The following morning, Victoria arrived shortly after 10. Eleanor was in the library when she heard the carriage. She stood near the window. Through the glass, she watched a black carriage stop beneath the stone entrance. A woman stepped out. Even from a distance, Eleanor understood why London had admired her. Lady Victoria Harcourt was elegant, tall, dark-haired, dressed in deep burgundy velvet. Her posture was effortless. She did not look like a woman arriving to visit a married man. She looked like a woman returning to something that belonged to her. Eleanor watched Adrian descend the steps. He walked toward Victoria. They spoke quietly. Victoria smiled. Then she reached for his arm. Eleanor stepped away from the window. She did not want to see what happened next. But she heard the library door open. A moment later, Adrian entered. Eleanor, she turned. Your Grace, Victoria has arrived. I know. His eyes moved toward the window. You don't have to meet her. Eleanor looked at him. I think I do. You are not obligated. I am your wife. Something in the way she said it made Adrian uncomfortable. He nodded. Very well. They entered the drawing room together. Victoria was standing near the fireplace. She turned. For the first time, Eleanor saw her face clearly. She was beautiful, but beauty was not what Eleanor noticed. It was the confidence. Victoria looked at her as though she were assessing a temporary inconvenience. Then she smiled. Your Grace. Eleanor returned the smile. Lady Victoria. Victoria's gaze moved to Adrian. I had hoped we might speak privately. Adrian's expression hardened. Anything you wish to say can be said here. Victoria looked back at Eleanor. I see. She paused. Then she smiled again. Congratulations. Eleanor inclined her head. Thank you. You look very well. So do you. Victoria's smile tightened. For a moment, neither woman moved. Then Victoria said, I hope you are happy here. Eleanor looked around the room, at the enormous windows, the portraits, the marble fireplace, the expensive furniture. Then she looked at Adrian. I am still learning what happiness looks like in this house. Adrian's eyes moved toward her. Victoria noticed. The atmosphere changed. Victoria slowly sat. I suppose we all have to make adjustments. Eleanor understood the meaning. She sat opposite her. Yes. Victoria leaned back. I was not aware the wedding would take place so quickly. It was necessary. I imagine it was. Another silence. Then Victoria looked at Eleanor's hand. At the wedding ring. Her expression changed, just slightly. But Eleanor noticed. You know, Victoria said quietly. Adrian once told me he would never marry without love. Adrian's voice was cold. Victoria. She looked at him. I am only speaking honestly. Eleanor remained still. Then she said, Perhaps people change their minds. Victoria smiled. Perhaps. Adrian stepped forward. That is enough. Victoria rose. Of course. She looked at Eleanor one final time. I hope we shall become friends. Eleanor smiled. I wouldn't count on it. Victoria's eyebrows lifted. Adrian looked at Eleanor. It was the first time she had seen genuine surprise on his face. Victoria gave a small laugh. Then she left the room. The door closed. Adrian turned toward Eleanor. You didn't have to provoke her. I didn't. You knew what she meant. Yes. Then why answer? Eleanor stood. Because I am tired of being spoken about as though I am not in the room. Adrian said nothing. She walked past him. He caught her wrist. Not hard. Just enough to stop her. Eleanor looked down at his hand, then up at him. His fingers released her immediately. I apologize. She nodded. Thank you. She walked away. Adrian watched her disappear down the corridor. Something had changed. He could feel it. The woman who had entered Blackthorne Hall as a frightened bride was beginning to disappear, and he was beginning to see someone else. Someone who did not ask for his affection. Someone who did not compete with Victoria. Someone who had stopped trying to earn a place in his heart. 3 days later, Eleanor made her first change to the household. She dismissed no one. She insulted no servant. She demanded no extravagant alterations. Instead, she opened the unused east wing. For years, it had remained locked. Eleanor discovered that it contained a small schoolroom. Dust covered the desks. The shelves were empty. She asked the housekeeper about it. It belonged to the late Duchess, the woman explained. What happened to it? No one used it after her death. Eleanor looked around the room. Then we will use it again. For what, Your Grace? For the village children. The housekeeper stared at her. Within a month, the east wing had changed. Books arrived. Desks were repaired. A small stove was installed. Eleanor began spending her mornings there. She taught the children herself when the appointed tutor was absent. She learned their names, their fears, their ambitions. She discovered that one boy wanted to become an engineer. A little girl named Clara wanted to read every book in the library. Eleanor encouraged them. Word spread through the village. The new Duchess was different. Adrian heard about it from his steward. She has opened the east wing, the man told him. For what purpose? A school. Adrian looked up from his papers. A school? Yes, Your Grace. Who approved the expense? The steward hesitated. The Duchess. Adrian sighed. How much? The steward told him. Adrian stared at the figure. It was modest, almost insignificant compared to the estate's wealth. Leave it. The steward nodded, then paused. Your Grace? Yes? The village seems very fond of her. Adrian looked toward the window. He could see Eleanor in the distance. She was standing beneath an old oak tree with 3 children gathered around her. She was laughing, actually laughing. Adrian had never seen it, not once. He watched her for longer than he intended. Then he quietly returned to his papers. He told himself it meant nothing. But that evening, when Eleanor entered the dining room, Adrian looked up before she had even taken her seat. And for the first time since their wedding, he smiled. Adrian's smile disappeared before Eleanor could notice it. He lowered his eyes to his plate, as though nothing had happened. But Eleanor had seen enough. She did not mention it. She simply took her seat. Good evening, she said. Good evening. The exchange was ordinary, almost painfully so. Yet something beneath it had changed. The servants noticed. Neither husband nor wife did. Or perhaps neither was willing to admit it. Dinner continued in silence. Eleanor spoke about the school. Adrian asked 2 questions. She answered them. He listened. That alone was unusual. When the final course was served, Eleanor pushed her plate away. The children need more books. Adrian looked at her. How many? She hesitated. Perhaps 30. Buy 50. Eleanor blinked. I beg your pardon? You said they need books. Yes, then buy 50. She studied him. You don't have to. I know. A pause. Thank you. Adrian nodded. The candle between them flickered. For some reason, Eleanor found herself watching his hands. His wedding ring was there, still new, still unfamiliar. She looked away. Adrian noticed. He noticed far more about her than he had intended. The way she tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The way she pressed her lips together before disagreeing with someone. The way she never raised her voice. And, increasingly, the way she looked at him without expecting anything. That last thing troubled him most, because he had once believed Eleanor's lack of expectation would make their marriage easier. Instead, it made him feel strangely invisible. And Adrian Ashcombe had spent most of his life believing he could never become invisible to anyone. The following week brought the first snowfall. Blackthorne Hall disappeared beneath a pale blanket of white. The servants moved through the corridors carrying logs and lamps. Eleanor spent most mornings in the schoolroom. One afternoon, Adrian found her there alone. She was standing on a small wooden ladder, trying to reach a book from the highest shelf. He stopped in the doorway. Eleanor, she turned. The ladder shifted beneath her. Adrian crossed the room immediately. His hand caught her waist. For one brief second, she was pressed against him. Neither moved. The room became very quiet. Eleanor could feel the warmth of his hand through the fabric of her dress. Adrian could smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair. Then Eleanor stepped away. "Thank you." He removed his hand. "You could have fallen. I've survived worse." His eyes remained on her. What could possibly be worse than falling from a ladder? She gave him a small smile. "Being married to a man who doesn't want you." The smile disappeared from his face. Eleanor reached for the book. Adrian took it first. He handed it to her. "Perhaps you should let someone else reach the upper shelves." "Perhaps." She placed the book on the table. Adrian looked around. There were children's drawings pinned along the walls, small paintings, handwritten letters. One depicted Blackthorne Hall beneath a crooked yellow sun. Adrian picked it up. "Who drew this?" "Clara. She is talented." Eleanor smiled. "She thinks you are frightening." Adrian looked at her. "Does she?" "She says you look like the man in the portrait who ate children." He stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, Eleanor laughed. A genuine laugh. Warm. Unrestrained. Adrian found himself smiling again. This time, he did not stop himself quickly enough. Eleanor noticed. Their eyes met. The laughter faded. Neither looked away. Then a voice came from the doorway. "Adrian." "Victoria." The moment broke. Victoria stood elegantly beneath the archway. Her eyes moved from Adrian to Eleanor, then to the space between them. She smiled. "I hope I am not interrupting." Adrian's expression became guarded. "No." Victoria entered. "I was hoping to speak with you. About your mother." Adrian's face changed. Eleanor noticed immediately. Victoria saw that she had noticed. "I thought perhaps Eleanor should know." Adrian's voice hardened. "No." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You are certain?" "Yes." Eleanor quietly gathered the books from the table. "I'll leave you both." Adrian looked at her. "You don't have to." "I think I should." She walked toward the door. Victoria stepped aside. As Eleanor passed, Victoria spoke softly. "Your Grace." Eleanor stopped. "Yes? I hope you understand that some matters in this family existed long before you arrived." Eleanor looked at her. "I understand." "Good." Eleanor smiled politely. "But I hope you understand something too." Victoria waited. "I am not temporary." Then Eleanor left. Victoria's smile vanished. Adrian looked at her. "What was that?" "Nothing. You don't speak to my wife that way." Victoria stared at him. "Your wife?" There was bitterness in her voice. "Yes. You never wanted her." Adrian said nothing. Victoria stepped closer. "You told me this marriage meant nothing." "I was wrong." Her expression changed. "What?" Adrian looked toward the door Eleanor had just disappeared through. "I said I was wrong." Victoria's face became pale. She had not expected that answer. Neither had Adrian. For the first time he understood that something had shifted inside him. Not love. Not yet. But something dangerous. Something he could no longer dismiss. That evening, Eleanor received a letter from her younger sister. She read it beside the fire in her bedroom. The letter contained ordinary things. A complaint about the weather, news from their father's solicitor, a small description of the village. Then, near the bottom, one sentence made Eleanor stop. Asterisk, "Father says you must be careful. He believes the Duke may reconsider the financial arrangement if the marriage becomes inconvenient." Eleanor read the sentence again, then again. Her chest tightened. She folded the letter. So that was the truth. Her position was conditional. If Adrian wanted out, she could lose everything. The title, the house, the security her family had purchased with her marriage. She looked down at her wedding ring. For the first time, she wondered whether Adrian had ever intended to keep his promise to her. A knock came at the door. She hid the letter. "Come in." Adrian entered. He stopped when he saw her expression. "What happened?" "Nothing." He knew she was lying. "Eleanor." She looked at him. "Did you know my father's debts were part of the marriage agreement?" "Yes." "And if you end the marriage," he was silent. Her eyes hardened. "If you end it, what happens to my family?" "Your father signed a legal agreement." That isn't what I asked. Adrian took a breath. I would not leave you without protection, but you could. He didn't answer. Eleanor stood. I see. She walked toward the window. Adrian followed. I would never do that. You don't know that. I do. How? Because I am not my father. Eleanor turned. What does that mean? Adrian's face became distant. My father married my mother for money. She said nothing. He despised her. The words were quiet. He made her life miserable until she died. Eleanor's expression softened. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to. Victoria knows. Adrian looked away. Yes, the silence returned. Then Eleanor said, That is why you don't want a marriage built on money. He looked at her. That is why I never wanted a marriage at all. She understood. For the first time she saw something beneath the Duke's coldness. It was not indifference. It was fear. Fear of becoming the man he hated. Fear of repeating a marriage that had destroyed his mother. Fear of loving someone only to discover that love could become another form of imprisonment. Eleanor's voice softened. Adrian. He looked at her. I am not your mother. I know, and you are not your father. His eyes remained on hers. I know. For a moment, they stood very close. Neither moved. Then Adrian reached toward her. He touched one loose strand of hair near her cheek. Eleanor stopped breathing. His fingers barely touched her skin. Then he withdrew. I should go. She nodded. He walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned. Good night, Eleanor. She looked at him. Good night. The door closed. Eleanor remained by the window. She touched the place where his fingers had been. And for the first time since the wedding, she allowed herself to wonder whether she had been wrong about him. But the following morning, she discovered a folded newspaper waiting beside her breakfast. The headline was small. The implication was not. Lady Victoria Harcourt, seen at Blackthorne Hall. Beneath it was a sentence that made Eleanor's stomach turn. Asterisk. Sources close to the Ashcombe family suggest that the Duke's recent marriage may be little more than a temporary arrangement. Eleanor read it once, then folded the paper. She did not cry. She did not confront Adrian. Instead, she finished her tea. Then she walked to the schoolroom. That morning, she taught the children how to write letters. Clara held up her page proudly. Look, Your Grace. Eleanor smiled. Very good. What should I write next? Eleanor looked at the child's paper, then at the snow beyond the window. Write something you believe. Clara thought carefully. Then she wrote. Eleanor leaned closer. The little girl had written. Asterisk. I believe people can change. Eleanor stared at the words. For some reason they hurt. That evening, Adrian returned from London. He found Eleanor in the library. She was reading. He approached her. I saw the newspaper. She did not look up. So did I. Victoria had nothing to do with that article. I didn't ask. I want you to know. Eleanor closed her book. What do you want me to know? That I did not authorize it. She looked at him. And do you care what people believe? No. Then why explain? Adrian paused. Because I care what you believe. The room fell silent. Eleanor's expression changed. Adrian realized what he had said. Neither of them spoke. Then Eleanor quietly asked, Do you? Yes. It was the first uncomplicated answer he had ever given her. She looked away. Then perhaps you should prove it. How? She closed her book. Not to me. He frowned. To yourself. She walked past him. Adrian turned to watch her leave. He had spent 6 weeks believing Eleanor was the woman trapped inside his marriage. Now he was beginning to understand something far more dangerous. Eleanor was becoming the woman who could walk away from it, and the thought of losing her frightened him more than he was willing to admit. For the first time in his life, Adrian Ashcombe was afraid of losing something he had never believed he wanted. He did not sleep that night. Long after the household had gone quiet, he remained in the library, with a glass of untouched brandy beside him. The fire had burned low. Rain tapped against the windows. On the desk lay 3 letters, one from his solicitor, one from his steward, and one from Victoria. He had read the last one 4 times, asterisk Adrian, Asterisk, you have changed. Asterisk, I do not know whether she has done this to you deliberately, but I know what I see. Asterisk, you look at her differently. Asterisk, if you still remember what we once promised each other, come to London. Asterisk, if you do not, then tell me plainly. Asterisk, Victoria. Asterisk. Adrian folded the letter. He should have felt anger. Instead, he felt exhaustion. There had been a time when Victoria's approval mattered to him, a time when her presence could make an entire room seem brighter. He had loved her, or believed he had. But love, he was beginning to understand, was not always the same thing as longing. Sometimes longing was simply the desire to possess what had once been yours. He thought of Eleanor, not her wedding dress, not her title, not her family's debt. He thought of her standing in the schoolroom, with ink on her fingers, laughing when one of the children compared him to a monster from an old story. He remembered the way she had looked at him when he touched her hair. There had been no calculation in her eyes, no attempt to please him, only surprise, and something dangerously close to tenderness. Adrian closed his eyes. Then he heard footsteps. He looked toward the door. Eleanor appeared in the hallway. She was wearing a dark blue robe over her nightdress. Her hair was loose. She looked tired. Eleanor. I couldn't sleep. Neither could he. She hesitated. I wanted to ask you something. Come in. She entered the library. The firelight softened her face. Adrian stood. What is it? She held a folded letter. My father's solicitor wrote again. Adrian's expression changed. What did he say? That the bank has agreed to delay the final payment. That is good. Yes. She looked at him. But only if the marriage remains intact. Silence. Adrian understood. You believe I intend to leave you. I don't know what you intend. He moved closer. I told you I would not abandon your family. You did. And I meant it. She looked down. Then why do I still feel as though I am waiting for the other shoe to fall? Adrian had no easy answer, so he gave her the truth. Because I have given you very little reason to trust me. Eleanor looked up. He continued. I married you without love. Yes. I treated you like an obligation. Yes. I allowed Victoria to remain too close to my life. Yes. He paused. And I have expected you to accept all of it without complaint. Eleanor's eyes softened. Yes. Adrian looked at her. I was wrong. She was silent. He had never apologized easily. Perhaps that was why the words felt heavier than they should have. I don't know what you want from me, she whispered. Neither do I. She almost smiled. That is honest. I am trying. I can see that. Their eyes met. Adrian reached for her hand. This time, he did not stop himself. His fingers closed gently around hers. Eleanor looked down. Neither spoke. The moment was fragile, almost innocent. Then a knock came at the door. They separated. A servant stood outside. Your Grace, Lady Victoria requests a private audience. Adrian's jaw tightened. At this hour? She says it is urgent. Eleanor released his hand. You should see her. Adrian looked at her. Eleanor, she may have something important to say. He hesitated, then nodded. I will speak to her. Eleanor left the library. She walked slowly through the corridor. She did not know why she felt disappointed. She had known Victoria would always be part of Adrian's past. But now that Adrian had held her hand, that past felt different, more threatening, more real. In the drawing room, Victoria waited beside the fire. She was dressed in black, no jewelry except a diamond necklace. She looked almost like a widow. Adrian entered. What happened? Victoria turned. You didn't come to London. No. Why? I had no reason to. She smiled sadly. You used to. That was before. Before her? Adrian's expression hardened. Do not make this about Eleanor. But it is about Eleanor. Victoria stepped closer. You don't love her. Adrian said nothing. You cannot. Why? Because you married her for duty. He looked at her. People can change. Victoria's face tightened. Can they? Yes. And you have? Yes. She stared at him. Then tell me. What? Tell me that you no longer love me. Adrian was silent. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Say it. He looked at her. Once, he would have avoided the answer. Tonight, he did not. I no longer love you. Victoria closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek, but when she opened them again, the sadness was gone. Something colder had replaced it. Very well. She reached into her handbag. Then perhaps your wife should know the truth. Adrian frowned. What truth? Victoria handed him a document. He unfolded it. His face changed. It was an old letter, his mother's handwriting. He recognized it immediately. Where did you get this? Your mother gave it to my mother before she died. Adrian read the first few lines. His hands tightened around the paper. What does this mean? Victoria smiled. Ask Eleanor. He looked up. What does Eleanor have to do with this? More than you realize. Victoria walked toward the door. Adrian caught her arm. Explain. She turned. I think you should ask your wife why her mother visited Blackthorne Hall 17 years ago. Then she left. Adrian remained motionless. His mother's letter trembled slightly between his fingers. 17 years. Eleanor's mother. He knew almost nothing about that visit. His father had forbidden anyone from speaking of it. His mother had died before Adrian was old enough to ask the right questions. He returned to the library. Eleanor was standing by the window. She turned when he entered. Is everything all right? Adrian looked at her. For the first time since their wedding, he wondered whether he truly knew the woman standing before him. Your mother? Eleanor froze. What about her? Did she ever come to Blackthorne Hall? The color disappeared from Eleanor's face. Adrian saw it. That was enough. You knew. She looked away. Adrian, you knew. I knew she had been here. When? Before I was born. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked. His voice sharpened. I didn't know I had to. Eleanor stepped closer. I didn't know what it meant. What did she tell you? Nothing. Eleanor. My mother died when I was 12. I know. She never spoke about this house. Adrian held up the letter. Then why does she appear in my mother's correspondence? Eleanor stared at the paper. Her face changed. Where did you get that? Victoria. She closed her eyes. Of course. Adrian understood. Victoria has been investigating my family. She has been investigating both of us. Why? Eleanor shook her head. I don't know. Adrian stepped closer. What did your mother know? I don't know. You're lying. Eleanor looked at him. I am afraid. That stopped him. Of what? My father. Your father? He warned me never to ask questions about my mother's time at Blackthorne. Adrian stared at her. Why? I don't know. The room became silent. Then Eleanor whispered. There was a portrait. What portrait? My mother once mentioned a woman in this house. Adrian's face tightened. Who? She called her the first Duchess. My mother. Eleanor nodded. She said your mother had a secret. Adrian looked toward the portraits lining the walls. My mother died 24 years ago. I know. Then why would she still have secrets? Eleanor did not answer. Adrian walked toward the wall. He stopped before his mother's portrait. The Duchess stood there in a pale blue gown. Beautiful, elegant, sad. Adrian had looked at that portrait thousands of times. But now something caught his attention. A small detail. Around her neck was a pendant. He had never noticed it before. He moved closer. The pendant was shaped like a small silver rose. Eleanor stepped beside him. My mother had one. Adrian turned. What? She wore the same pendant. Neither moved. Then the door opened. The housekeeper stood there. She looked frightened. Your Grace. Adrian turned. What is it? The woman hesitated. There is something you should see. She led them through a corridor Eleanor had never entered. At the end was a narrow staircase. They descended. The air became colder. Dust covered the stone walls. At the bottom stood a locked door. The housekeeper produced a key. Adrian stared at it. What is this room? The housekeeper's voice trembled. Your mother's private room. Adrian had never known it still existed. The key turned. The door opened. Inside, everything remained untouched. A writing desk, old books, a faded blue chair, a mirror covered with cloth, and on the desk, a small wooden box. Adrian walked toward it. Eleanor followed. He opened the lid. Inside lay a silver rose pendant, exactly like the one in the portrait. Eleanor covered her mouth. Adrian looked at her. Then beneath the pendant, He found a folded piece of paper. He opened it. Only one sentence had been written. Asterisk. If Adrian ever marries a Vale, tell him why. Adrian stared at the words. His breathing stopped. Eleanor looked at him. What does it say? He handed her the paper. She read it. Her eyes widened. Neither of them spoke, because suddenly, their marriage did not look like an accident. It did not look like a financial arrangement. It looked planned, and somewhere in the history of both their families was a secret powerful enough to explain why their parents had spent years keeping them apart. Outside, thunder rolled across the night sky. Adrian looked at Eleanor. Tomorrow, we find out what our parents were hiding. She nodded, but neither of them noticed the figure standing at the end of the corridor. Victoria had followed them, and she had heard everything. The next morning, Eleanor woke before dawn. She had barely slept. All night, the same sentence had returned to her mind. If Adrian ever marries a Vale, tell him why. Why? The question had become impossible to escape. She dressed quietly and went downstairs before the household was awake. The library fire had nearly gone out. She stood beside it, staring into the embers, when Adrian entered. He looked as though he had not slept either. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then he placed a small bundle of papers on the desk. I spent most of the night searching my mother's correspondence. Eleanor turned. And she mentioned your mother several times. Eleanor's breath caught. Why? I don't know. He opened the first letter. My mother wrote that your mother was the only person she trusted. Eleanor stared at him. That cannot be right. Why? My mother never spoke of her. She may have been protecting you. From what? Adrian looked at the old paper. That is what we need to discover. He showed her another letter. It was dated 17 years earlier. The handwriting was unmistakably his mother's. Eleanor read it slowly. It described a secret meeting, a child, a threat from Adrian's father, and one name repeated several times. Val. Eleanor looked up. There was a child. Adrian nodded. My mother wrote that someone intended to take a child away from its family. Whose child? She never said. Eleanor felt a chill move through her. Could it have been you? No. Then who? Adrian did not answer. They searched the private room again. Behind an old bookcase, Eleanor discovered a narrow compartment in the wall. Inside was a small leather journal. Adrian opened it. The first pages were harmless. Household accounts, appointments, names of guests. Then the writing changed. His mother's handwriting became hurried. Asterisk Richard knows. Asterisk if he discovers the child is still alive, he will destroy everything. Asterisk. Adrian stopped reading. Eleanor looked at him. Your father? Yes. He turned the page. Another sentence. Asterisk the child must remain with the Vales. Eleanor's face went pale. The Vales? Adrian stared at the page. My family knew your family before we ever met. More than that. He looked at her. Our mothers were protecting someone. Eleanor whispered. Who? Before Adrian could answer, footsteps sounded in the corridor. They closed the journal. The housekeeper appeared. Your Grace. Yes? Lady Victoria has requested breakfast with the Duchess. Eleanor and Adrian exchanged a glance. Tell her no, Adrian said. The housekeeper hesitated. She says she has proof concerning the matter you discussed last night. Adrian's expression hardened. Send her in. Victoria entered 5 minutes later. She carried a small leather case. Her face was calm, almost triumphant. I thought you might want this. She placed the case on the desk. Adrian opened it. Inside was an old photograph. 3 people stood in front of Blackthorne Hall. His mother, Eleanor's mother, and a third woman. Eleanor leaned closer. She recognized the third face immediately. Her father's sister, Aunt Margaret. But Margaret had always been described as having died before Eleanor was born. Adrian looked at the photograph. When was this taken? Victoria answered. 17 years ago. Eleanor shook her head. That is impossible. Why? My aunt died before that. Victoria smiled. Did she? Eleanor looked at Adrian. Something cold settled in her chest. What are you saying? Victoria opened the leather case again. She removed a second document. A death certificate. Eleanor read it. The name was Margaret Vale. The date of death was listed as 17 years earlier. Adrian looked confused. Victoria's voice became quieter. The certificate was falsified. Eleanor's face drained of color. By whom? Your father. Why? Victoria looked directly at her. Because Margaret was the mother of the child. Silence. Adrian's eyes moved toward Eleanor. What child? Victoria smiled. The child your mothers were hiding. Eleanor could barely breathe. Who? Victoria looked at Adrian, then at Eleanor. You. The room became utterly still. Eleanor stared at her. No. Victoria placed another paper on the desk. Your father is not your biological father. Eleanor stepped backward. Adrian caught her arm. She looked at him, stunned. My mother? Your mother raised you, Victoria said, but she was not the woman who gave birth to you. Eleanor's world seemed to tilt. She looked at the photograph again. Margaret, her aunt, the woman she had been told died before she could remember her. Adrian's mother had helped hide the truth. Her father had falsified the records, and the marriage between Eleanor and Adrian suddenly looked like the final piece of an arrangement that had begun before either of them was born. Adrian turned toward Victoria. How did you discover this? My family has kept records for generations. Why tell us now? Victoria's smile disappeared. Because I wanted Adrian to understand what he married. Eleanor looked at her. What does that mean? Victoria hesitated, then said, You are not merely a Vale. Eleanor's voice trembled. Then what am I? Victoria looked at Adrian. Your mother believed Eleanor was descended from the old royal line. Adrian went still. Eleanor laughed once. It was a broken sound. No. Victoria continued. The family lost its claim generations ago, but the bloodline survived. Adrian stared at Eleanor, the woman he had married for duty. The woman he had believed was simply a young daughter of a declining country family. A woman whose identity might have been deliberately hidden. Eleanor sank into the nearest chair. I don't understand. Adrian knelt before her. He took her hands. Look at me. She did. We will find the truth, but what if it changes everything? His expression softened. It already has. She looked away. I don't know who I am. You are Eleanor. She looked back at him. That's all? For me, yes. Her eyes filled with tears. Adrian gently wiped one away. Victoria watched them. Something in her face hardened. You see? Adrian turned. You should leave. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You choose her. Yes. Even now? Especially now. Victoria stood very still. Then she picked up her coat. You will regret this. Adrian did not answer. After she left, Eleanor remained silent. Adrian sat beside her. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Eleanor whispered, What if my father knew? He probably did. What if he lied to me my entire life? Then we will confront him. She looked at Adrian. Will you come with me? He answered without hesitation. Yes. They left for Vale House the following morning. The journey took several hours. Neither spoke much. Eleanor watched the countryside pass beyond the carriage window. The house she had grown up in no longer felt like home. Every memory seemed to have acquired another meaning. Her mother's silence, her father's fear, the old portrait of Margaret that had mysteriously disappeared when Eleanor was a child. Everything seemed connected. When they arrived, her father was waiting. He looked older than Eleanor remembered. He saw Adrian first, then his daughter. His face changed. You found out. Eleanor stepped inside. You knew. Her father closed his eyes. Yes. The word broke something inside her. How long? Your entire life. She stared at him. Who am I? He looked at her. You are my daughter in every way that matters. That wasn't my question. He sat slowly. Your mother was my sister's closest friend. Eleanor's breathing became shallow. Margaret was your biological mother. Yes. Why did she give me to my mother? Because she was being hunted. By whom? Your grandfather. Eleanor froze. My grandfather. He wanted the family inheritance and the royal claim. Adrian stepped forward. What happened to Margaret? Her father looked down. She disappeared. Where? We never found her. Eleanor closed her eyes. For years, she had believed she had been abandoned by a mother who died before she could remember her. Now she learned that the woman had vanished while protecting her. Her father continued, "Your mother raised you because Margaret believed it was the only way to keep you alive. And your brother, my father discovered the truth. Did he hurt her?" Her father did not answer. He didn't need to. Eleanor covered her mouth. Adrian moved beside her. Her father looked at him. "There is one more thing." Adrian's expression hardened. "What? Your mother knew." "My mother? She knew Eleanor's identity. Then why did she allow the marriage?" Her father looked between them. "Because she believed you were the only man powerful enough to protect Eleanor if the secret ever came to light." Silence. Adrian stared at him. "So this marriage was planned, not by us, by them." "Yes." Eleanor looked at Adrian. Her voice was barely audible. "Then perhaps we never chose each other." Adrian took her hand. "No." She looked at him. "Perhaps we did." For the first time, he smiled. Not the polite smile of a duke. Not the expression he wore at dinners and public gatherings. Something warmer. Something entirely hers. "I chose you long before I understood that I had." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Adrian moved closer. "I thought I was trapped in this marriage." He touched her cheek. "Then I realized I was terrified of losing it." She closed her eyes. "I stopped waiting for you." "I know. And that was when you finally looked at me." "Yes. Why?" His voice was quiet. "Because when you stopped asking me to love you, I finally understood that I already did." Eleanor looked at him. Then she kissed him. It was not like their wedding kiss. There was no audience, no priest, no obligation. Only two people who had spent months misunderstanding what they felt. When they separated, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I am sorry." "For what?" "For making you believe you were unwanted." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "You were rather convincing." He laughed softly. It was the first time she had heard him laugh without restraint, and somehow, that sound felt more intimate than any declaration. Months later, Blackthorne Hall changed. The school in the East Wing grew. More children arrived. The library became Eleanor's favorite room. The portrait of Adrian's mother was restored. Beside it, Eleanor placed a small portrait of Margaret Vale, not as a secret, not hidden, but as a woman who had sacrificed everything to protect her child. Adrian never again spoke of Eleanor as an obligation. When guests asked how they had fallen in love, he never gave them the full story. He simply looked at his wife and said, "She stopped waiting for me." Eleanor would smile because she knew what he meant. She had stopped waiting for his permission to be happy, stopped waiting for his attention, stopped measuring her worth by the love of a man who had not yet learned how to give it. And in the end, that was what changed everything. Adrian had not fallen in love with a woman who begged him to choose her. He had fallen in love with the woman who discovered that she could choose herself. Years later, on a quiet winter evening, Eleanor stood beside the same window where she had once read Victoria's letter on her wedding morning. Snow covered the gardens. Adrian entered behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist. She smiled. "Do you remember our wedding?" "Yes." "You looked terrified." "I was." "Of me? Of what I might become?" She turned. "And what did you become?" He looked at her. "A man who finally understood that love is not something you are forced into." He kissed her forehead. "It is something you choose." Eleanor rested her head against his shoulder. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, the fire burned quietly. And the house that had once felt like a prison finally felt like home. Not because Eleanor had become a duchess, not because Adrian had learned to love her, but because, somewhere between duty and desire, between secrets and silence, they had finally chosen one another freely. And that was the one thing no family arrangement, no old title, and no hidden secret could ever take from them. The first winter after their reconciliation was quieter than either of them expected. There were no dramatic announcements, no grand celebration, no attempt to erase the difficult months that had come before. Eleanor remained Eleanor. She still spent her mornings in the schoolroom. She still walked through the village without an entourage, whenever the weather allowed. She still preferred the library after dinner, where the fire burned low and the windows reflected the room like dark mirrors. Adrian remained Adrian as well. He was still reserved in company, still impatient with unnecessary conversation, still capable of reducing an entire room to silence with a single glance. But there were differences now. Small ones. The kind Eleanor noticed because she had once noticed his absence so carefully. He no longer left the breakfast table without asking how her morning had been. He began reading the reports from the school himself. He remembered which children were struggling with mathematics. He knew that Clara preferred adventure stories, and that Thomas wanted books about engineering. Sometimes Eleanor would find him standing outside the schoolroom doorway, watching the children laugh. When she caught him, he would pretend he had only been passing by. She never teased him about it. She simply smiled. One afternoon, Eleanor found a letter waiting for her. The handwriting was unfamiliar. She opened it carefully. It was from a solicitor in London. Inside was news about Victoria. Lady Victoria Harcourt had left England. Her family had sold their London residence and moved to the continent. There had been no scandal, no public confrontation, no revenge, only an ending. Eleanor read the letter twice, then placed it in the fire. Adrian found her there. What was it? News from London. About Victoria. Yes. He waited. She has gone. Adrian nodded. Eleanor watched the paper curl into ash. Do you regret what happened? No, she looked at him. Not even a little? He came closer. I regret that I ever made you believe she mattered more than you. Eleanor smiled. That sounds almost like an apology. It is. You are getting better at them. He gave her a quiet look. I have had a good teacher. She laughed. Then the smile faded. Adrian? Yes? Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had never been forced to marry? He considered the question. Probably. And? I think I would have spent years convincing myself I was content. With Victoria? Perhaps. And me? He looked at her. I might never have known you. The answer was so simple that it hurt. Eleanor lowered her eyes. That would have been unfortunate. Yes. He reached for her hand. It would have been the greatest mistake of my life. She squeezed his fingers. Outside, evening settled over Blackthorne Hall. The same house that had once seemed cold now carried different sounds. Children laughing in the east wing. Servants moving through the corridors. The piano in the drawing room. Eleanor's footsteps. Adrian's voice calling for her when he could not find her. The house had not changed as much as they had. That was the truth Eleanor finally understood. Home had never been the walls. It had been the feeling of knowing she could remain without having to earn her place. Several months later, Adrian took Eleanor to the old chapel behind the estate. It had been closed for years. The doors were covered with ivy. Inside, dust floated through shafts of afternoon light. At the far end stood a small stone memorial. Adrian stopped before it. Eleanor read the name. Margaret Vale, her mother's name. Eleanor touched the stone. For years, she had imagined Margaret as a ghost, a woman who had abandoned her, a woman she had been told almost nothing about. Now she understood. She loved me, Eleanor whispered. Yes, she gave me a way to save me. Yes, Eleanor closed her eyes. I wish I could have known her. Adrian stood beside her. You know part of her. She looked at him. How? Because you do the same thing. What? You protect people even when no one asks you to. Eleanor smiled faintly. I don't think that makes me like her. It does. He took her hand. And I am grateful. They remained there for a while. Neither needed to say anything more. When they returned to the house, Eleanor found something waiting in the library, a small wooden box. She recognized it immediately. The box from Adrian's mother's private room. He had restored it. Inside was the silver rose pendant. Beside it was a second piece of jewelry, an old ring bearing the Vale crest. Eleanor touched it. Where did you find this? Your father gave it to me. Why? He said your mother wanted you to have it when you were old enough to understand. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Adrian stepped closer. You don't have to wear it. She picked it up. I think I do. He helped her place it around her neck. The silver rose rested against her skin. She looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time, she did not see the frightened bride from that November morning. She saw the woman who had survived the truth. The woman who had stopped waiting, the woman who had chosen her own life. Adrian stood behind her. Their eyes met in the reflection. "Do you know what I remember most about our wedding?" he asked. Eleanor smiled. "That you looked terrified." "No." "What then?" "You told me my promise was too small." She laughed softly. "I remember." He rested his hands gently on her shoulders. "You were right." She turned. "About what?" "I promised not to humiliate you." He paused. "I should have promised to love you." Eleanor looked at him. "You couldn't promise that." "No, but you can choose it." "I do." He kissed her. This time there was no hesitation, no obligation, no audience, only the quiet certainty of two people who had finally reached the place they had been searching for without knowing its name. Years later, people in the county would tell stories about the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorne. Some said their marriage had been arranged. Others claimed it had been planned by their parents long before either of them was born. Some believed Eleanor had married Adrian for his wealth. Some believed Adrian had married her for her family's bloodline. None of them knew the truth. The truth was much simpler. They had begun as strangers. They had been bound by duty. They had hurt one another without intending to. And then, slowly, painfully, they had learned that love was not proven by how desperately one person waited for another. It was proven by the moment both chose to stay. On another winter evening, many years after their wedding, Eleanor stood once again beside the tall library window. Snow fell over the gardens. Behind her, Adrian closed the door. She turned. "You are late." "I was working." "You always say that, and you always wait for me." She smiled. "No." He stopped. "What?" "I don't wait anymore." Adrian walked toward her. "What do you do?" She reached for his hand. "I choose you." His expression softened. "And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I choose you again." He kissed her forehead. Outside, the snow continued falling over Blackthorne Hall. Inside, the fire burned steadily, and the woman who had once entered the house believing she had been unwanted finally understood the truth. She had never needed to be chosen in order to have worth. She had needed only to choose herself. And once she did, the man who had never wanted her became the man who could not imagine his life without her. Their story had begun with a marriage neither of them wanted. It endured, because in the end, they chose it freely. And perhaps that was the greatest difference between duty and love. Duty tells you where you must remain. Love gives you the freedom to leave and makes you choose to stay. If this story stayed with you, take a quiet moment to support dramatic history. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more forgotten romances